World War II is often remembered for massive tanks, advanced aircraft, and industrial firepower. But on the ground, survival often came down to creativity. When standard weapons ran out or couldn't be trusted, soldiers, partisans, and even civilians turned to the oldest resource they had: ingenuity. Across Europe, Asia, and the Pacific, makeshift weapons, built from scraps, farming tools, and stolen materials, played a deadly role in the fight for survival. Today, we're uncovering 7 homemade weapons that were not only built in desperation but actually used in World War II battles, sometimes with shocking success. When Nazi Germany occupied Poland, resistance fighters couldn't rely on official supply lines. Instead, they built their own guns, literally in basements and barns. The simplest design was the pipe gun, a rough single-shot weapon made from plumbing tubes, rubber bands, and nails. It fired standard pistol ammunition but could explode in the user's hand if misfired. Despite the danger, thousands were made by the Polish Home Army and other underground groups. These weapons were small, concealable, and easy to assemble from scavenged materials. Some even used bicycle parts as triggers. They weren't pretty, but at close range, they worked. Few homemade weapons are as infamous as the Molotov cocktail. First used during the Spanish Civil War, it became a symbol of defiance in World War II. Finnish troops famously perfected it during the Winter War against the Soviets, filling bottles with gasoline and oil, adding a cloth fuse, and throwing them at tanks and troop carriers. Ahmed Dainsin. The name Molotov cocktail was actually a sarcastic jab at Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov. The Finns joked that if Molotov was sending them food parcels, which was the propaganda term for Soviet bombs, they'd return the favor with cocktails. Molotovs were brutally effective against tanks with open hatches or poorly armored engine compartments. Even elite troops couldn't ignore the terror of a flaming bottle smashing onto a vehicle. This one sounds like a dark joke, but it's absolutely true. The British Special Operations Executive, or SOE, actually created explosive rats, real dead rats that were stuffed with plastic explosives. The plan was to scatter them near German boiler rooms and factories. If workers threw them into furnaces, the resulting explosion could trigger massive secondary blasts. The first shipment was intercepted by the Germans before use, but the idea absolutely terrified them. German intelligence even ordered widespread inspections for rat bombs, which ended up wasting valuable manpower. So even though they were never deployed as planned, these grim little inventions still worked, through fear alone. In the Pacific, especially in the Philippines, homemade weapons were a matter of life or death. When Japanese forces occupied the islands, local guerrillas and resistance fighters had to make do with whatever they could find. The bolo, a traditional machete-like knife, became both a farming tool and a close combat weapon. Some groups forged crude pistols from scrap metal or converted flare guns to fire real bullets. Others mounted old rifle barrels to wooden stocks and fired them with rubberized triggers or nails. These weapons were used in actual jungle skirmishes, especially ambushes. Filipino fighters combined stealth, knowledge of terrain, and homemade arms to harass Japanese patrols long after official armies had fallen. The British Sten gun was designed to be cheap and easy to mass produce, so easy in fact that resistance groups across Europe began copying it, often by hand. In Denmark, Norway, and even occupied France, underground workshops built unlicensed Sten copies using scrap steel, car parts, and bicycle tubing. These garage-built weapons weren't perfect. Some jammed, some misfired, but they gave resistance groups something they desperately needed: firepower. A few models even used handmade magazines and crude suppressors. When dropped ammo or parts from Allied airdrops ran short, the locals simply built more. The fact that so many worked at all is a testament to the resilience and mechanical skill of ordinary people under occupation. Before the term IED became common in modern warfare, World War II partisans were already mastering it. Resistance groups in Yugoslavia, France and Poland regularly built bombs from mining charges, artillery shells, and unexploded ordnance. They used alarm clocks as timers, doorbells as detonators, and even children's toys as concealment. Trains, supply trucks, and enemy patrols all fell victim to these homemade explosives. The ingenuity was staggering, and often tragic. Many saboteurs were killed while building or placing these bombs, but their actions crippled supply lines and struck fear deep behind enemy lines, proving that creativity could be as dangerous as any rifle. One of the strangest and most terrifying homemade weapons came from the Soviet Union's defense of Stalingrad. Facing shortages of fuel and flamethrowers, Soviet engineers, and even civilians, built flame spears. These were long metal tubes fitted with a hand-pump fuel tank and a burning rag at the tip. When squeezed, they shot bursts of flammable liquid several feet forward. They were heavy, short-ranged, and dangerously unstable, but devastating in close combat, especially in the confined spaces of ruined buildings. The flame spear wasn't a factory weapon, it was born out of necessity, yet eyewitness reports confirm they were used to clear German strongpoints in brutal house-to-house fighting. Homemade weapons tell a different side of World War II. Not of grand strategy or polished machinery, but of survival, desperation, and courage. Whether it was a farmer building a pipe gun, a partisan forging a blade from a plow, or an engineer turning rats into bombs, these creations remind us that innovation doesn't always come from laboratories. It comes from fear, determination, and the human instinct to fight back. Even now, many of these improvised designs, especially Molotov cocktails and homemade explosives, remain symbols of resistance around the world. World War II may have been defined by massive industrial power, but it was also won by individuals who refused to surrender, even when all they had left was a few scraps of metal and the will to keep fighting.